Let's head over to the Big Ten. CD and I kind of had a little bit of a debate about this. We each made a top however many. He thought that far and away it was Wisconsin. Wisconsin was my number 2, and I do think that I see the argument for Wisconsin being the toughest schedule in the Big Ten. I mean, look, it's a pretty brutal schedule. CD mentioned to me off air. Do you want to tell him what you told me off air in terms of what you're predicting their schedule to look like after week 4?
Yeah, if you talk to me right now, I would not pick them to win a single game after week 4. And I think they will probably be better than last year. Yeah, that's what's ridiculous. And poor Luke Fickell, I say with a smile on my face, poor Luke Fickell is, in a pivotal year 3, and this is his schedule he gets drawn. Thank you, his AD. Thank you, our Big Ten officers and commissioners, for giving him that. I would also, like we talked about off air, I threw out Rutgers as, a potential, I think, sneaky tough schedule. I also wanted to bring them up because last year they were one of those teams that avoided, the Big Four last year that we talked about coming in the season, and how there was a separation between those 4 and the rest of the conference, especially talent-wise and coaching. And then you brought up UCLA, and that's really, really interesting. It made me definitely double-check. They have a tough schedule. I think you're higher on Utah potentially than I am. And UNLV on the road, I think, is pretty sneaky. And also kudos to UCLA for doing that and going to Vegas there in the out-of-conference. But, yeah, I think this Wisconsin schedule, I mean, you're talking about not an easy, one of the better teams in the MAC historically with Miami, Ohio, and then Alabama in your out-of-conference as well. That one's on the road after they came up to Camp Randall and absolutely pushed you around for 4 quarters there. Yes, Maryland's in there as one of the teams that you want to see on their schedule in the Big Ten, but then you're looking at a lot of top half football teams there, top 60% or top, 40%, I guess is the correct vernacular there. You got at Michigan, Iowa, Ohio State, at Oregon, and that's just all back to back to back to back there. You do get a bye before you welcome Washington. Then you go on the road, to the last year's college football playoff participant in Kirk Cincinnati and Indiana, as well as finishing off with, one of the hottest teams, in this offseason in the Big Ten with Brett Bielema and Illinois, as well as going on the road, finishing off, obviously, with the Axe against your rival Minnesota. It's brutal. It is brutal out there for our Badger fans, up in Wisconsin there.
Now, we have to see how the season plays out. There's a lot of new faces in terms of like quarterbacks in the Big Ten. But I'm looking at that stretch from Iowa to Illinois, and you might be playing against 6 of the top 7 or 8 quarterbacks in the league. If you really want to break it down, I'm sure there'll be arguments for other. There'll be arguments for other quarterbacks, right? And other whatever people's rankings differ. We have no idea what it's going to look like till the season happens, but that's a tough stretch of just quarterbacks that you have to go against. Not to mention the hype that Illinois is getting. Damon Williams over at Washington is getting a lot of looks. Fernando Mendoza at Indiana. What are we talking about? And then Minnesota is a place that the last, 4 or so years, Christopher, you'd say, it's kind of been split 50-50 there, but you got to go on the road. And then Drake Lindsay, who's a first-year starter, will have had 11 games to figure it out.
Exactly.
So, and Minnesota is still adjusting to a lot of stuff. They got a lot of players that they're missing from that last season. Corey Heatherman's going to Miami to be at the DC there, so lots of moving parts for sure. But by that point, Wisconsin might be absolutely decimated in terms of just injuries, which kind of plagued them a little bit at times these last couple of years, and just the sheer grit and toughness and heavyweights that you're playing on the schedule. Like, it's going to be a grind if you're a Wisconsin fan. And look, last year was the first time you didn't make a bowl game in 22, 23 years, whatever the number was. You might want to get comfortable with the idea that you might not make it again to a bowl game.
The line, the win total line is 5.5, right? So Vegas says you're right there. I'm making a bowl game, but there is big time juice to the under, -170. So not a lot of value there if you're taking the under, which we'll see what happens there when we do talk about our future show back over in August. But yeah, it's brutal. And you're also talking about, like, what makes this so hard in the Big Ten is it's a huge conference and there's a lot of parity. meaning not. I'm sorry. There's not a lot of parity in
Scheduling
terms
parity.
of scheduling parity. There's like you have big gaps between recruiting resources, coaching, talent acquisition, all that kind of stuff there from your Purdue's and even Rutgers, Minnesota's, Northwestern, like those kind of schools in terms of resource wise. And then you have your top dogs. And this schedule, you're playing 5 teams, including Alabama, right? That like continuously every year expect their teams and programs to be competing for playoff spots, right? To be among the 12 best teams in college football, you have to play 5 of them. And then you're also throwing in, that's not including Iowa, who's been extremely successful the last decade and a half there, Illinois, Indiana, who just went on a run last year, as well as Minnesota. So like it is brutal for our Badger fans. But hey, I mean, if anyone could do it, it's Billy Edwards, right?